My good friend and frequent guest on Hey Don't Shoot, Jorge Garcia, changes his mind, buys and sells more lenses than anyone I've ever known. He might buy a lens one day, decide he doesn't like it, and sell it the very next day. But ever since he stepped up to the new Sony A7 III, he seems to have stabilized his lens kit just a little bit. So when he messaged me to tell me he was selling his Sony G 12-24mm lens, I was a little bit shocked. After all, Jorge shoots some real estate photography, and lately he's been shooting a lot of landscapes. The Sony G 12-24mm f4 lens would seem like a perfect fit, but then again, maybe not. Jorge told me that he intends to sell his 12-24 and replace it with the Zeiss 16-35mm f4 lens for his wide-angle photography needs. He told me his reasons yesterday morning as we headed out to shoot a sunrise here in southern New Mexico, looking east towards Texas and the Franklin Mountains.
I hardly have found myself using anything below the 16mm focal length on this. I can only think of maybe 2 times in the past 6 weeks that I've owned this lens that I've used it at the full 12mm at its widest. But everything else I've shot with it, I've really have mostly stuck to between 18 and 16mm if I really have to go wide. I've often found that 24mm is wide enough in many of my landscape situations. This lens hood here, this fixed, it's permanent because the element is so bulbous on the 12-24 that this is on here permanently. And as of this video, they are starting to sell filter sets for this, but they're pretty expensive. So I figured, why not go back to a 16-35 where they sell much more affordable filter sets for these.
Some of the key differences between these lenses, aside from the focal range difference, are the build and price. The body on the Sony G 12-24 is a high-quality plastic, whereas the Zeiss 16-35 is all metal. The Zeiss also features image stabilization, the Sony does not. The Sony G 12-24 is priced $200 higher for a brand new model. However, since the Zeiss 16-35 has been around a bit longer, you'll probably be able to find good deals on used models as well as a $200 lower retail price.
I thought about getting the 16-35 G Master. The only reason I can really think of personally that I would need that aperture is for astrophotography, which I hardly ever do. So for my personal use, it's more practical for me to just stick with an f4. Now I was about at 18mm. Now I'm wide open at 16. And what I love about this lens is that it's just that signature Zeiss look, and it's super sharp. Not to say that the Sony 12-24 isn't any sharper, it is pretty sharp, but this one, just as far as the optical quality and just the appearance, that signature Zeiss pop, I just, almost ask myself, I don't know what I was thinking getting the 12-24 instead of this one again. It's on this third of the frame and the cloud's up here, so there's a sort of balance to the shot. This is exactly what I wanted. That was too high right now. So I'm still at f11. I'm shooting 1/5 of a second to expose for the foreground. The background's a little blown out, but again, this can be fixed in post. And it looks good. Doesn't look too bad, but I wouldn't go for this shot. I wouldn't go that wide. I would stick to.
Oh, that's really wide.
Yeah, it's pretty wide, and there's nothing wrong with that. Just from a personal perspective, I've hardly gone anywhere. I've hardly gone this wide for my shots. And one of the reasons I had opted for the 12 was because sometimes I get real estate gigs, and I thought it would be good to have this wide of lens just in case. But thinking back at my past jobs, I've had 16 millimeters was always more than enough to get interior shots. If I go down to 16, it's still pretty good. I'm good with that.
It's so wide at 16. Yeah, it can very specialized if you want a 12 millimeter.
And I can already tell the difference with the optics as far as the color temperature. To me, I have not changed the color temperature on the camera. The white balance on the Zeiss, it's warmer, and on the 12 to 24, I noticed the colors are a little bit cooler. I like this. I mean, we're in the desert. At the end of the day, it's all personal preference. Hopefully, my opinions will help you make a decision on what lens to buy as far as 16 to 35 or 12 to 24, and if you go for the G Master or for the F4. I've owned the 12 to 24 for about 6 weeks now, and again, I have not found myself using 12 millimeters much at all. It's always either between 16 and 24. If you have a scene like this where you have mountains in the background, a wide angle lens is going to make them look like a speed bump. So I like having that focal range up to 35 because you can zoom stack in post and make those mountains bigger. And I tried that with the 12 to 24. It was okay, but personally I wasn't happy. So
Jorge and I both agreed. Ultimately, it comes down to need and personal preference as far as which focal range suits you better. We also agreed that we preferred the look, warmth, and color rendition that the Zeiss lenses deliver. There's nothing wrong with the Sony G 12-24. It's simply that neither of us hardly ever need to go wider than 16 millimeters. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up, leave a comment, which lens do you prefer, and of course, subscribe to our channel.